Welcome to the show discussing problems and issues of health with Dr. Alcena. For this segment of the show, I'm going to continue to talk about diabetes mellitus. In particular, I promise to talk about diabetes mellitus that can cause hypoglycemia. That is non-diabetic associated hypoglycemia. That's what I'm going to talk about in this segment. But before I do so, this being the last show, this is the 12th show of this series. I want to go over the statistic of the incidence of diabetes mellitus for you. Across the world, there are 463 million people with diabetes mellitus as of 2020. In this country, there are more than 100 million people with diabetes mellitus, according to the CDC. When you look at the literature, they're talking about 30.3 or so million people with diabetes mellitus. They're not including the full picture. They're not including the so-called pre-diabetes, which I'm sure does not exist. And I told you why. I'm not going to bore you with that again. Anybody who thinks that exists definitely don't know what they're talking about. As far as death is concerned, 72,000 deaths in the U.S. secondary to diabetes mellitus every single year. It's a serious, serious, serious problem. Across the world, there's some 4 million people die every year because of diabetes. Every 7 seconds, somebody is dying as a result of diabetes mellitus. Serious business. In this country, 14.2 million visits are made to the emergency room every year because of diabetes. And if one talks about visits that is due specifically to hypoglycemia, meaning low blood sugar, 245,000 visits are made to the emergency room every year secondary to hypoglycemia. And the death rate for people who die because of hypoglycemia in this country, 252,806 deaths per year. This is a serious, serious, serious problem. Diabetes is a serious medical problem that one has to pay very close attention to it. What are the things then that can cause somebody's blood sugar to become low besides insulin and oral hypoglycemic agent? Now I'm talking about non-insulin, non-oral agent associated low blood sugar. It has nothing to do with diabetes or the condition. Certain problem associated with hormone, such as hypothyroidism. There's a tumor that also can develop in the pancreas called insulinoma. Insulinoma can cause one to also over-secrete insulin, and that can cause the person to have low blood sugar. And that's a very serious problem. There are ways of figuring it out, and there are ways of diagnosing it, and I'm not going to bore you with that. Hemodialysis can cause somebody's blood sugar to come very low as well. Then, of course, we are now in the era, because obesity is such an epidemic in this country. Of all the developed countries in the world, the U.S. have more obese individuals than any other developed country. And because of that, they need to do bypass surgery, gastric bypass surgery, to try to help these individuals who are obese become a common practice. It's a very necessary practice. However, there are many, many, many long-term complications of gastric bypass surgery. Necessary though it is, and significant percentage of people, you have to realize that when they bypass the stomach, there are certain things that's going to happen. Among them, of course, is hypoglycemia, reactive hypoglycemia. That's a very serious condition. I've had several patients of mine who wind up with this problem, walking around the blood sugar of 40, 45, some of them passing out. Very dangerous for them to even drive to work because they can pass out on the highway. And I have to instruct these individuals to make sure they carry some candy or glass of orange juice with them all the time, or some cookies, so that when they feel the symptom coming on, they can just grab some orange juice and drink it. And they have gone back to get reevaluated, and this problem have not been resolved, to the best of my knowledge. And there are other conditions. Since I'm talking to you about it, I might as well be more complete. When you bypass the stomach, there's a substance that we need that allows us to absorb iron, which we need in order to produce red blood cell, so that the hemoglobin in the red blood cell can carry oxygen to perfuse the rest of the body. Well, it's called ferroportin. And ferroportin is located in the wall of the human duodenum. If you bypass the duodenum, and I'm not a surgeon, I don't know how these procedures are done. I don't want to speak for them, and I don't make a fool out of myself. I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to surgery, because I'm not a surgeon. But I will tell you, if you bypass the duodenum, the patient will not be able to absorb iron, period, ever. And I have several patients in my practice as I speak who's walking around with extremely low serum ferritin. But what do you do? Okay, patient is 50, 60, 70, they have low serum ferritin. Some of them are women, they're no longer bearing children, they're no longer menstruating. Then you have to worry about to evaluate these people to make sure that they don't have some kind of a malignant tumor that are causing them to lose iron, or they don't have H. pylori infection, all sorts of stuff that can also cause them to have stomach ulcers. It becomes complicated, so you're forced to send them to the gastroenterologist to be evaluated, because you don't sit there assuming that it's because they had bypass. That's why the iron is low, only to find out that they have tumor that were not diagnosed. So you got to be very careful. If you evaluate them for all these things come back normal, they still have iron deficiency. I have had situations where I had to send people on outpatient to get infusion of Vinofer, which is iron. You do it for a few weeks, the level goes up, only to find out months later start going back down again. After a while, the insurance, of course, won't pay for it. And you cannot have low ferritin and don't be sick from it, don't have symptoms from it. The symptoms are, there's the long list. The most crucial one, of course, is because the cytochrome system in the brain is part of the storage iron, and the ferritin is part of the storage iron. So when your ferritin is low, your cytochrome system iron concentration is either low or absent. You cannot process oxygen. That's why these people are yawning and feeling tired. They can barely do a day's work because they're so tired all the time. Those are crucial points. On top of that, again, I don't want to sit here and badmouth gastric surgery, because I'm not, and I've sent several patients for that procedure. That, by the way, that's one of the reasons why we have patients whose blood sugar could not be controlled, and once they have the bypass surgery, now the blood sugar is not only well controlled, they don't even need any medication anymore. Now you understand that's part of that mechanism, but sometimes it just goes too low. B12. All of us need B12 to function properly. You cannot have low B12 and be considered healthy. And unfortunately, the symptom associated with low B12, if they're not reversed within 5 years, they are permanent. What are some of the symptoms? Well, the myelin, all the nerves we have in our system, be it in the brain or wherever they're located, they are covered with what's called myelin sheets. It's a myelin, that's the nerve, the covering of the nerve is a substance called the myelin sheets. People get hooked up, get tied up, and thinking that you have to be anemic to be considered B12 deficiency, completely 1,000,000,000% wrong. As a matter of fact, the very last stage in the B12 deficiency syndrome happens to be the anemia part. We as human, adult human, have 5,000 micrograms of B12 in the body. We use about 0.05 microgram per day via a different system that we use them, lose them in the stool and skin, whatever. But it takes 10 years to completely wipe out the B12 concentration before anemia will set in. So when you go to school, they're teaching you about macrocytosis. By the time macrocytosis comes in for anemia to macrocytic anemia to follow, the patient has been in a wheelchair, also has lost his or her memory, and is also developing seizures and all sorts of other chronic, permanent B12 deficiency associated problem. I'm telling you this because to absorb B12, there's a substance called the intrinsic factor. But the intrinsic factor is in the wall of the stomach. So if you bypass the stomach, you can't absorb the B12 because you can't absorb B12 by mouth without having intrinsic factor. But where is the intrinsic factor? It was bypassed. Again, I want you to understand, I'm not a surgeon, I disqualify myself. And I also want you to understand, I'm not here to say anything bad about gastric bypass, because it is almost always necessary because of the obesity. The complication of obesity is also outrageously bad. But I want you to know there are consequences. There's a whole lot of a long list of other substances that I won't bore you with that you won't be able to absorb because you had gastric bypass. So it is the job, therefore, of the professional people who are doing a great job doing the procedure to explain that to you. As I said last week, I'm not going to sit here and let you know confidentially who the physician here on the 890,000 physicians who are licensed practicing medicine on an everyday basis, who the physician is or was, who was given the honor of setting the protocol for this particular procedure. And yet the physician is not a GI doctor, nor a surgeon. That's not how the system works. In the United States of America, as it is, I'm sure, in other developed countries, the people who are in power, who have the need to set up this protocol, decided on their own whose physicians they're going to choose to set a protocol for them based on the physician's intellectual and professional standing and achievement. I'm not going to sit, and those are all confidential. What's fascinating about it, once you do these things, for whoever group, whatever organization that I should do them, you must turn it over to them, and it becomes legally theirs. That's the process. I can, however, tell you, as I sit here, and I said that last week, of all the books, I've just completed book number 29. God knows how many dozens of articles. Let me give you an idea. A few years ago, something was being updated at Einstein. It was decided that it was no longer necessary to call people clinical anything. You were an assistant professor, or you're associate professor, or you're a professor. So I got involved, tied up in looking up my profile at Einstein, and I'm sure you could look at it on the M.A.C.P website. I was asked, well, we cannot put your 33-page resume there for you, but we could post just the article. I said, okay, fair enough. First of all, they didn't even believe that I was who I am because I speak with an accent. And when I called the IT people, they couldn't believe that somebody who speaks with my accent, with my skin color, could have a 33-page resume. So they played all sorts of game to make sure that I was not an imposter. When they realized that I was not, after one of the dean stand up for me and say, what are you talking about? This is Valiere Alcena. He's one of us. Okay, do that. So I was able to send to Einstein to put on my whatever profile you have. Single line, 9 pages of single line of articles only. Let me repeat that. Okay, 9 pages of single line of article only that I have written over the years. Okay, and that is comparing to what I have done that you will never see. That's minuscule comparing to what physicians like me have been asked to do, and we sign it over. When you're reviewing an article for this major journal, you can't just say accept or not accept. You have to write little pages of why this article should be published or why it should not be published. Sometimes 4, 5, 6 pages. Sometimes longer than the article itself that you're reviewing. And those things will never see the light of day. They are incredibly classic stuff that you will never see. My children, grandchildren will never see that their parent, father or grandfather wrote that stuff, because that's the system. I'm not unique, because it takes 3 reviewers to have an article approved. 3 separate parts of the country or the world. We don't know each other. We independently have to come up with an idea that is the same reason for the article to be published, even though we don't know each other. And those things take a lot of time, to the point where, as of last year, I said, no more, so I'm not getting involved. I've done it for almost 40 years. No, I'm sorry, guys, no more, I'm done that. Let me write my books, okay? So in any event, I know what I'm talking about, okay? Suffice it to say, important though this procedure is, you must realize there are major side effects associated with it. Okay, other thing that can cause hypoglycemia that is not diabetes associated is, of course, hunger, starvation, anorexia nervosa, okay, will cause you to have low blood sugar, okay, alcohol abuse, infection of different types, hypothyroidism, liver disease, okay. There's certain supplements, such as fenugreek, I don't even know what the heck fenugreek is. Ginseng, I know what that is. Cinnamon, I know what that is. Alcohol abuse. All these things can cause you to develop hypoglycemia, which is really, really can be super dangerous. Kidney failure, low level of cortisol, low level of growth hormone, low level of glucagon, or low level of epinephrine. And so all these things can cause you to have hypoglycemia that is not associated with diabetes. You say, well, what is the big deal, Val? Why is hypoglycemia so dangerous? Well, it is dangerous because we need glucose in order to survive, in order to live healthily. You can't live healthy without normal amount of glucose, because oxygen cannot be processed without glucose. And what are the symptoms of hypoglycemia? You feel hungry, start shaking, anxious, dizziness, confused, nervousness, sweaty, irritability, rapid heart rate, seizures. You can lose consciousness. And of course, ultimately, you become comatose. Okay. As I said, 250,806 people die annually in this country, according to the last statistics, because of low blood sugar. So those are serious, serious problems. Has nothing to do with diabetes associated. I talked about that last week. So these are serious problem. Serious problem. That's why so many people wind up in the emergency room, because every year 14.2 million people showed up in the emergency room because of diabetes associated problem. and 245,000 wind up in the ER every year because of low blood sugar. So the thing to do then is to instruct, first of all, when your patient is going to have procedure like this, you must explain to them what's going to happen. But explain to them they need to eat stuff that has glucose in it. When you have diabetic patients, men, women, or children, you must instruct them to always carry a little bottle of orange juice or soda of some type in the bag that they carry. They must always have candies on them. They must always carry something that has glucose in it so that when they start feeling the symptom coming on, then they pop the stuff in their mouth. They drink some orange juice or some soda. That would raise the blood sugar, buy them time until they can seek medical help to try to help solve the problem. And if you're having this recurrent episode of hypoglycemia and you did not have bypass surgery or you had nothing to do with being starved, which by the way is a common thing. It's nothing to play game about. Starvation causes a lot of deaths, hundreds of thousands, millions of deaths across the world. This world that we live in, this great country in America. You have to understand, America represents only 4% or so of the world population. It is a shame to realize how many millions, hundreds of millions of people are starving, are dying from starvation. Starvation is one of the most common cause of death in the world as we speak. This modern world where people have so much, they don't even know what to do with it. So much food gets thrown away in this country and other developed countries every day. People throw the food away because, God forbid, people eat the food that you give it to them and you're responsible for it. The next thing you know, you're being sued. So you have no idea. And again, I don't want to be personal, but I am who I am what I am. I have absolutely, I will never change who I am, nor do I want to. Why should I? You won't believe something about I could tell you. I must have been born to become a teacher. My first job as a teacher, I was 7 years old. Because when my mother died, this is a painful experience, but I don't mind sharing with you. When she died, she was this very wealthy, brilliant Jewish woman, super, super smart. And she took me to this place in Haiti called M.A.C.P when I was 5 years old. Because she said, quote, I was a genius. She wanted to prove it. She took me to this school, Le Frère de M.A.C.P. These were all Canadian brothers. So they kept me there for the whole day. I was 5 years old, giving me all sorts of stuff to do. I was just having a ball, a little boy. I didn't even know I was being tested or whatever. So at the end of the day, they told my mother to come and get me at 5 o'clock. She came over and to pick me up. And they told me I was accepted in school to bring me in September. That was it. And the father who was in charge told my mother that my IQ is the highest that he has ever seen. And he's been in this business for a long time. Of course, I happen to know what the IQ is, but I won't tell you. Because my mom told me. Unfortunately, I don't have the certificate, but her certificate was given to her. Because all sorts of crazy stuff happened after she passed away. So since I was 5 years old, I left home. However, when she passed away, where I was, all of a sudden, I was a little prince. All of a sudden, they want to transfer me into a little domestic. I refused, absolutely refused. They want me to go to half-day school. I refused to go there as well. Because I was a star in my school, I refused to go to the half-day school. However, there was a boulanger next to where I was. Boulanger is a bakery. So this gentleman had 3 kids. One was 8, one was 9, and one was 10 and a half or whatever. So he would pay me with the bread that was not sold and the patties that were not sold. When they brought them back, they can't sell them anymore. So I would get paid by giving me bread and patty to help his 8-year-old and his 9-year-old to do their homework. So that was my first teaching job. I was 7 years old. I'm teaching these people how to do their homework. And then I would get some patty and some bread in return, because the people where I was now refused to give me food because I was revolting in the fact that they wanted me to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning with my short pants, it's freezing, to go and bring water, even though they have running water. They don't want to use the running water because it's too expensive. I have to go and get water. It's a fight to fight with other kids and other people to get the water in the public section. And after doing it a few times, I refused to do it. So the punishment says not to feed me. You can't make this up. Okay, so, and of course, to make a long story short, by the time I was 8 and a few months, I said the heck out of this, so I ran away. Never saw these people again until it was time for me to travel out of Haiti. I didn't even know I didn't have to go. So I went back over there to get my birth certificate and my other stuff. Later I found out I didn't have to do that. I could have gone to the registrar's office in the town where I was and get my stuff, but I didn't know that. So when I walked in, I was a big guy. I was a weightlifter. They thought I come there to fight. I just come there to get my papers. Okay, that's the last time I saw these people. So hunger is something that I'm very familiar with. And I can tell you, it's painful. You feel the pain in your stomach. When I came to this country, I lived on Wonder Bread and Kool-Aid and American cheese. That was my meal for the first few years when I was here, because I was making $1 an hour in some factory. When you drove on the West Side Highway, you see Manhattan Industrial Center on the left-hand side. That's the building. I was working $1 an hour making the women rollers, the hair rollers. There was one company that was making that, H. Goodman and Son. I was the one making those things. So I know what hunger is. So I'm very sensitive to it. When you talk about hunger, all you could do to help somebody who is suffering from hunger, please go ahead and do it, because it is a very painful experience, and I survived it. Just because I'm a physician now, don't expect me to forget what I've been through. I will never forget that. I will always fight for my patients, fight for the poor until the day I die. That's right. Take care, my friend. Until I see you again, this is the end of the series on diabetes. Next week, I'll come up with something else to talk about. Until such time, keep watching the show. This is Dr. Alcena saying so long and bye-bye.